Minister Goyal, let me start by asking you about the huge anticipation there was in the build-up to Howdy Modi, and then after that, President Trump meeting with India's Prime Minister, that there will be at least some kind of a limited trade deal that you'd announce. Houston came and went, New York came and went, everyone's still waiting for that trade deal. What happened?
First of all, thank you, Professor Schwab, for your kind words, and a warm welcome to all the honorable ministers, Secretary Wilbur Ross, all the honorable ministers, delegates from around the world, our Indian participants. And I do hope the discussions during this forum will be a forerunner to much more engagement between all of us. Thank you, Rahul, for your opening remarks. Some of them were completely unaligned with reality, particularly the personal ones. Some also were probably, you made the same mistake that I did a few days ago, and I was taken to task by the media a lot for a gaffe, a recent gaffe, but anyway, this audience need not know. But the torrid time in our relations could possibly also be something like a torrid love affair. And I think the relations between the Indian government and the United States government at the leaders level, at our level, and at the people-to-people level are better than ever before. The leaders get along very well personally, but also understand each other and understand what's good for the two countries, for the people of the two countries, and for the world as a whole. For both these countries, the oldest and the largest democracy in the world, I think trade is one aspect of a multi-dimensional relationship, but a very important aspect. And trade is not something that's to be decided for one transaction. It's not as if you're just going and buying a hotel or sorting a bankruptcy that our senior colleague, Secretary Ross, would have to do. Trade has to consider the past, the present, the future, the political dynamics, local issues, long-term issues, bilateral and multilateral commitments. So I think it's a very complex story. And in that complexity, we are having an absolutely wonderful engagement. The ministerial level, all of us get along very well with each other. We understand our imperatives, our mutual imperatives. America is a very powerful economy, is a very big economy, but also a very sensitive country. India has an important role to play in the geopolitics of this region. It's the largest democracy in the world, a country which, as Honorable Prime Minister mentioned at the Bloomberg event, a country which offers the four important Ds: the demographic dividend, a democracy, a huge demand of 1 billion people aspiring for a better quality of life, and a decisive leadership. And I think all these four elements are important to address the destiny of the world. And India is going to be an important player in the world's growth engine. The trade between the US and India is robust. I heard you say you did not find surging trade. I think imports from the US to India growing by nearly 30%, and exports from India to the US growing by nearly 20% in the last 1 year. If that is not surging trade, I yet have to see something surging better than that. But that's only the forerunner of bigger and better things to happen. We are at a reasonable trade level. Certainly our potential has not been reached. Both Ambassador Lighthizer, Secretary Ross, I and our two leaders have been discussing breaking the $500 billion barrier in terms of our mutual trade. And I would think the way our talks are progressing, I don't see any reason why we can't do that in the years to come. You mentioned about high expectations in Houston and New York. For your information, the first time I was able to meet and really further the talks and progress the talks actively was only on the Monday following Howdy Modi. So I don't know where all the speculation of an announcement in Houston, some outcome, even though a limited trade deal you would talk about, and on the Tuesday when we met came out. To my mind, as concerned ministers and as the political leadership, both of us also have a responsibility to keep the media busy. So to that extent, we were doing our duty to the media, keeping you busy with all your speculation, but doing our job on the sidelines diligently and in the best interests of both countries and our people.
Secretary Ross, we see the hugs, we see the handshakes, we see the bonhomie, but we also see no trade deal. We see the GSP being revoked, and in India, the government's been saying we are very conciliatory, we're willing to accommodate US interests. Despite that, GSP hasn't been brought back, and we don't have a limited trade deal, let alone a free trade agreement. What, according to you, are the key roadblocks, and how far are we from being able to address those successfully?
Well, thank you very much for convening this group. It looks like a very apt audience that we have here, and I hope we will not disappoint you as to content. But neither government said there'll be a trade deal in 5 minutes. That was not us, wasn't Minister Goyal, so I think that was just speculation. We do think that there's no structural reason why there can't be one pretty quickly. We each know the other's issues. We have for quite some little while. And pre-election, there were undoubtedly some constraints on India to deal with those matters. Now that the election has come and gone, and Prime Minister Modi has a very clear, strong position in the Parliament, should be a lot easier to take decisive action. There's also a lot of confusion. What is the U.S. position about trade deficits? We do feel our deficit is too high, and we intend both to increase total trade and reduce our trade deficit. But to us, there are three components of trade deficit. One is what I would call inevitable components for some countries. Namely, if a country doesn't have oil or natural gas of its own locale, it has to import it from somewhere else. Well, it's not the fault of the exporting country which one you have the deficit with. So that's not the kind of trade deficit that particularly bothers us. Similarly, where there's a true comparative advantage, there will be trade deficit in some product or another. We also view that as more or less a blameless trade deficit. It's the third kind, which are the ones that arise mainly because of artificial barriers, protectionist barriers that countries have thrown up. That's the one that we are concerned with. That's the one that we are determined to reduce, and we think that we will make progress there. So I wanted to clarify that we have a very focused effort in terms of trade deficit reduction. We also believe that by focusing mainly bilaterally, we can achieve much faster results for all countries involved. We made a deal with Canada and Mexico, very complex, very big trade deal, by far the biggest trade deal the United States has ever made, and that took only about 15 months to get itself negotiated. Trade deals often take 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. They frequently take so long that the issues aren't even the same at the end of the trade negotiations as they were at the beginning. We made a deal with Korea, Chorus. We renegotiated that trade agreement in a very few months, and we have a fairly broad agreement with Japan that also was done within a very few months. So for an administration that some parties think is somehow anti-trade or anti-trade deals, I would suggest look at the record. We have a better record on getting things done under the Trump administration than any other country.